In honor of Denver's decriminalization of magic mushrooms, doctors of Reddit, what, if any, is your best story of patients on hallucinogenics? I had a guy who was freaking out thinking he was going to die because he thought he had eaten too many hallucinogenic mushrooms. He went online and saw that sometimes patients are given activated charcoal to soak up the mushrooms in the stomach. Not entirely true, BTW. So he goes outside and starts chowing down on charcoal briquettes that he has in his garage for grilling. After about a dozen he realizes, holy shit, I'm eating charcoal briquettes. Now he is really freaking out, so he grabs his dog as the thinks he is never coming back to his house and drives himself to the addition. He parks out front, walks into Tridge with the pup black charcoal all over his face and hands, and says, I need a doctor and someone to watch my dog when I die. That's actually really considerate of the dog, if he was worried that nobody else would show up to take care of it in time following his demise. That guy had his priorities set. One of the benefits of hallucinogens, you tend to cling to what's important while you're being fired through the galactic pinhole. That is such an apt, accurate, and sweet description of the psychedelic experience. The accuracy of this is so real. I don't know the definition of a galactic pinhole, but I know what it means. The accuracy of this is so real. I don't know the definition of a galactic pinhole, but I know what it means. I'm a doctor. Not a great story, but I had a kid come into ed after taking some mushrooms at a bush doof and then feeling weird. We told him it was probably the drugs that he took. It hadn't occurred to him they might be linked. In my town though, the great majority of drug-related presentations are from meth, and they aren't pretty. We get meth-induced heart attacks, meth-induced seizures, meth-induced motor vehicle accidents, meth-induced sexual violence, and my personal favorite, meth-induced dickheadery, where a patient is being a dickhead in the community, and the police can't take them to the watch house, so they come to hospital instead. I've been spat on, punched, kicked, and called every name under the sun by meth-influenced patients. I've seen tiny psychotic women requiring 4 security guards and 4 police officers to restrain so that we can sedate them for their own safety. Meth is not good, kids. Edit. A bush doof is like a rave in the bush. Sorry for the confusion. You know how everyone says they live in the meth capital of the world? After rounding at a hospital in my area, I believe it. Probably 12 to 13 of our patients is actively using meth, or has used it in the past week. So much of what you wrote is familiar to me. Yeah, it's not uncommon for patients to say they don't drink or smoke because they know that it's bad for you, and have often seen their parents suffer the effects, but then they turn around and use 4th meth daily. Crazy. Had a woman come into the ed after ingesting some PCP. She was convinced she was dead and kept telling me she didn't get her last rites. At one point she stripped off all her clothes and shat the bed. Also mistook me for Jesus at one point. She was freaking out for nearly 24 hours. How did PCP ever get popular? Literally every story I have heard about it involves someone freaking out and getting violent. In lower doses it's a euphoric hallucinogen, and the reason it's been known as angel dust and love boat in the past. The stories about naked superhuman monsters are about people who overdosed and are having a bad go. Dust isn't always an instant werewolf kind of thing. On Christmas Eve my sister used to mix glitter and oats and have her kids sprinkle it on the lawn to attract reindeer. They called it Christmas dust. Well, everyone except my dad, who never quite got it right and kept calling it angel dust. After that we kept calling it angel dust, and her kids started calling it angel dust, and we didn't explain it to my dad for their years. After which my sister's Christmas Eve tradition became doing a big bag of angel dust on the front lawn. Your holiday tradition was to feed reindeer glitter? Surely that can't be healthy for them. I had a patient who had taken an ungodly amount of Benadryl in a failed suicide attempt. A lot of people think that, since it makes you drowsy, a bunch of it might be able to kill them in their sleep. Instead of killing them though, Benadryl basically gives you absolutely terrifying hallucinations for like 24 hours or more, and then leaves you with the worst multi-day hangover you have ever had in your life. He would not stop yelling and screaming about that damn cat poking its head out of the ceiling tiles every single time I left the room. He also had short bursts of thinking he was covered in bugs and I would find him stripped naked and yelling into the wall. Last place I wanna go to when I'm tripping is a hospital. Obligatory edit. Wow, I've always been a lurker, never had. So many people agree with me, lol. Also shrooms are amazingly amazing. Have a good day, people. What about a courtroom? I'm trying to think of other extremely unchill places. Slaughterhouse. If I went to a slaughterhouse on LSD or shrooms I would just pass out from terror and disgust. Would just be a complete overload. Definite PTSD from that experience. I'd get PTSD from being there on weed alone. I'm not a vegetarian, but I bet the experience would basically be 99% success rate vegetarian conversion therapy. Nice though the abattoir is. Did you say knives? Rotating knives, yes. Did you say knives? Rotating knives, yes. As a nurse, patient came in running in the air asking for a blood transfusion cause he believed that vampire bit his neck. Patient has no any visible marks or scars. Held him down for a while and asked him to calm down. He was so frightened that he asked for garlic to keep the vampires away. Eventually he calmed down and walked out on his own with no problem. Hope that you're reading this. I wanna take what you're taking. Hope that you're reading this. I wanna take what you're taking. Doubtful since most fun hallucinogenic drugs don't make you straight up hallucinate like this person seemed to be. Unless of course you take a rather large amount. I unknowingly took 5 to 6 grams of mushroom tea. My dumbass didn't weigh it out and found out next morning just how much I took as opposed to the 3 grams I eyeballed, and at some point in the night convinced myself that I was in a real life Splinter Cell game. I was 110% convinced that if one of the other dorm mates saw me going to the bathroom, that they'd bust me and I'd have to start over from my room to go back to the bathroom. Even then part of me deep down still knew that it was all in my head, but I was enjoying it too much. That sounds awesome. I'm sure you laughed a couple of times. Getting my RN at the moment. When I was a medical student, I saw a guy high as balls on PCP. I was working with a tiny little Asian chick who was a PGY3 resident, and when we walked in the room, this giant naked white dude high as hell sees her and screams that she was the devil or something. Guy lunges at her, and the cop in the room promptly slams him onto the bed. I try to help like any med student working in the field they wanna match in, and I swing around behind the guy, who's actively winning the MMA match with the cop, and grabbed him into a choke hold. Excellent bedside manner was a comment I got on my slip that day. I pin him for a femtosecond before he realizes he's crispy as shit on that good old phencyclidine, and he springs his upper body forward, swinging me over the back of the bed seat right onto his lap. It took me like 5 seconds to realize what happened. I noped right out of there right before the police tased him into oblivion. Hours later he was asking us rather politely for some orange juice with all 4 limbs restrained. Did he get his orange juice? Yep, sure did. This is the best news I've ever gotten. Patient care, bruh. Nephew of doctor, so here we go. Kid 16 to 17 walks in and is totally convinced there is a alligator actively eating his arm. Has screaming but his arm is both there and with no alligator eating it. I can only imagine what drugs he was on. That sounds like a full-blown delirium. The only drugs that would induce that are deliriants like datura or salvia. Maybe other hallucinogens like mushrooms or acid, if it was a very high dose, and he had some undiagnosed psychotic disorder. Even still, I'd bet he was on a combination of various drugs. Salvia wouldn't last long enough to visit the doctor, but it could have triggered a deeper latent psychosis. Datura seems likely. Benadryl wouldn't causes hallucinations like that, and lasts a good amount of time. You see and hear things that aren't there like spiders, animals, people, music, talking, etc. Not visual distortion swapping like psychedelics. So I would bet my money on that. Datura is pretty rare. Research chemicals maybe. I bet it was crocodile. No, crocodiles aren't the same as alligators. It was alligator. Had a friend become impatient with mushrooms once. He took an eighth, and an hour later decided they weren't very strong, so the most logical thing to do would be eat his other eighth. Cut to 2 hours later, and he is parked on top of a parking garage. Tried to drive across town when they kicked in, and he immediately realized his fuck up. He tried to wait it out, but after being abandoned by everyone else I wasn't around. No way in hell would I have left the poor guy on 7 grams of shrooms to his own devices, and he decides he needs help. So he calls 911. While on the phone he wants to be as honest as possible, so he tells them about his .22 caliber rifle behind the seat of his truck. Only it comes out as, there's a gun in the car. He says he was tripping and sweating so badly it was July. The next thing he remembers is hearing a tink 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 and looking up to being surrounded by police, guns drawn and ready for anything. Friend isn't a danger though, so they get him in an ambulance and give him charcoal to induce vomiting. The rest of the night is a blur for him, and he wakes up cuffed to the bed. They ask him if there's anyone he can call for a ride, and he tells them his mom is a nurse who works on the 2nd floor. Apparently while tripping he kept telling them to go upstairs and get mom, so they all have a chuckle realizing his mom really was upstairs. Dude, I couldn't tell you where my left hand was on 7 grams of shrooms, much less my mother. I'm a doctor, saw a guy carve out his own rectum anus because he was hallucinating there was a microchip inserted there. Not repairable, now he poops through an ostomy bag.